Growth versus resilience. What does it mean? What does it take? Dilemmas? Looking forward. So good morning, this is Tech TV again, and we will have a great discussion about resilience, and that of course in the context also of growth. Why? Because what we see happening is there's a stumbling in terms of the CIOs, the CDOs, CTOs, but also the boards of organizations having that pressure on growth, but also in terms of the resilience, cybersecurity, risk, liability. We are really talking about the stumbling between also the CIOs versus the CISOs. So how are we going to deal with this, and what do we need if we really want to have some pressure onto the factor of resilience, so to speak? So I'm looking forward, and of course I'm doing that with a bench of great tech leaders in the house. So I've got Mark from Microsoft. Good morning.
Good morning.
I've got Rien, and you know all Rien, one of the seasoned CEOs and CTOs in the Netherlands. Morning, Rien.
Good morning, Grob.
Morning. And I got Lars, and Lars is from DXC. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
And you drove all the way from Hamburg, right?
I did.
Yeah. So just to start with this, guys, let me have a quick round of the state of mind, your state of mind about the discussion we want to go about the growth versus resilience, right? And we get a little bit more pressure on the resilience, but how does that in the context of growth, right? So what is your mindset about that, Mark?
My view is that growth is needed for companies to grow, of course. It goes fast, especially with the new generation. So they want to use the newest technology in the cloud. They do it, but governance is lacking. So from a CISO perspective, that's where I would put the focus on. Know what you have in the company in order to protect it to some extent.
Right. So if you use the word lacking, just to rephrase it, is it lacking poorly? Is it?
Sometimes the scope of the CISO is whatever is on his agenda or hers agenda, correct. But it's not everything that's within the company. So mergers, acquisitions, spin-offs, things are forgotten sometimes.
Right.
But also developers spinning up stuff in the cloud, with whichever cloud that is, and connecting it, and then the CISO doesn't know.
Right.
So how will he protect?
Right. Rien.
As a CIO, you have to support the the strategy of the company, of course. And if there's a growth strategy, and many times it is, you have to support the growth by bringing new technology, maybe disconnect old technology, legacy systems. And if you bring in new technology, you have to work closely with the CISO, shoulder to shoulder, all the time. Sometimes CISO was somebody who said, hey, you cannot do that, you cannot do that, you cannot do that. An old-fashioned CISO maybe. But the modern CISO will help you getting the right technology in place with the right guardrails. I think that's how I want to work in general.
Right. So in the end, growth versus resilience should not be a dilemma.
For me, it's not.
Right.
Yeah, it's not.
Great.
It's just cooperation, you know?
Right. That's a good one. And your state of mind here?
Yeah, every organization, most organizations want to earn money. They have a business because they want to have a benefit of it. And new technologies offer new areas where they can work, where they can earn additional money, new business cases, etc. Unfortunately, it is by its nature that you have less experience with newer technologies. The new technologies often are complexer. Look at cloud and AI compared to the old castle model, where you had just my internal environment is secure, which always didn't really happened. Having the ability to make these additional business cases and business fields and areas as secure as possible and at the same time usable. That's always a tension field where you have those that say we need new business cases, we need new business, and on the other side, the people that need to defend your environment, we need to make it as secure as possible, which cost money and effort and people, etc. This naturally comes into a situation where it's sort of a fight between the different parts of the organization, and to get this aligned into your strategy and into the business with the new technologies and capabilities, that's almost an art that is really hard to achieve.
Yep, it's nearly an art. Well, at least in the Netherlands, we are having the pleasure of having a CAO community for over 20 years, and a CISO community just started for 1 year, right? So we are trying to break some rules here, right? To get those communities in sync, of course, because I think great remark, shoulder to shoulder. That's the only way to do. But if I take back the discussion from this context, right? So why, for an example, in your case, like DXC why is it important to bring that discussion to your customers? The discussion growth versus resilience, right? And having that pressure on resilience. Do you see a total lack in terms of within the governance, like Mark stated, or do you see the pressure on compliance, or do you see the angle that the emerging technology replacing a lot of technical depth, so to speak, is a hinder, or do you see that the role of the CISO is not mature enough, or do you? So a little bit that aspect. So why are you bringing that discussion as DXC to the market, right?
Of course, DXC is an IT security and IT security services provider supporting large international global organizations around the planet in almost any country of the world. So from that point of view, it's in our genes, in our DNA to work for our customers, with our customers, and try to support them to do their business as good as possible and as beneficial as possible. In order to achieve this, you obviously are automatically in this field of tension that I mentioned in regards to A, providing the new technologies and capabilities, and B, on the same side, doing this as secure as possible. As you can imagine, migrating in grown organization with all sort of different technologies, different operating systems, different philosophies in regards to how the organization grew up, to address this with new technologies, new business areas, as secure as possible. That's, as I said, is an art, and only organizations that are really experienced with all the different angles and dimensions that you need to get addressed in such situation are able to support these large global organizations as deep as this should be, and that's definitely a field where we love to play, obviously, and it's always fascinating to see what kind of cool stuff with the new technologies our customers, the organization, are able to do, and which new business cases and business benefits they can generate that maybe the developers of the products, as well as we as service providers, didn't even thought about, and then see the cool stuff that happens.
Right.
That's really an awesome thing. And obviously, to make this secure, and coming to your question in regards to the lack of governance or regulations, is by its nature, usually the technology is first. And then comes the legal stuff around that and the regulations. And from that point of view, technology is always, I think, at the beginning. And by nature, then legal regulation is later. And trying to get this addressed from legal point of view, you have implemented all your infrastructure and your products, and then becoming legally compliant, that's always a hard challenge, and it costs money. That's really the ugly point from that point of view.
Well, let's try to pull the onion a bit, right? So I want to touch base a little bit the discussion about the principles of difference, right? So growth versus resilience, right? So the risk, non-risk. But let's have it from a governance perspective, right? So growth as a strategy, as a company. Let's go into this field then of compliance, right? So what are we aiming at if you also look to the element, the last one, emerging technologies, different setup, cloud, multi-cloud, right, etc. So what does it mean, AI? I think still also a topic we need to discuss a little here, right? But let's start with the first one. That's governance discussion. Is there a governance discussion, Rien, or is this a non-discussion?
In my view, there should always be a governance discussion, always. Because you have to set the guardrails, regardless if it's legal or whatever. As a company, you have to set the guardrails and say, these are our policies, this is what you can, within those policies, those guardrails, you can maneuver. That's okay, and without, that's not allowed. I think you need that as a starting point. Otherwise, you get lost in all kind of applications that will run on the cloud or multi-cloud or an AWS or whatever you have. It's uncontrollable, so you have to have that governance. But within that governance, you should give the people the right to maneuver and do the things that they might do, experiment or bring in new technologies, for sure. But only in that way, I think you can control it.
Right. But what you see happening in the discussion of growth, and let's take in the sequence the discussion about the digital transformation, so to speak. Right? So you see a total new discussion going on is in the field of cybersecurity, for an example, is that the governance from cybersecurity is hung up wrongly within today's governance, right?
Yeah.
So what is the discussion behind that?
I'm not sure if I understand your question well, but from a cybersecurity perspective, you know, also there you have to set the guardrails. You have to define as I think as a board, you have to define what your risk appetite is. What kind of security measures you would put in place. I think that's important because that's the starting point. Otherwise, if that's not set, you always have a discussion between the CISO because they want to have it as secure as possible, or she wants to have it secure as possible, and you have the business that want to go and bring in new technologies, whatever, and automatically you get this friction. So if you set as a board, you set your risk appetite, I think then you already minimize a lot of those discussions, and then that security guardrails are part of your total governance.
Yeah. And how are they reflecting the discussion of the governance versus the set of compliance, right? So if you take the hard ones, right? So how is that in reflections to each other, right?
I think one of the really key buzzwords that he mentioned here is, and that we see in all sort of discussions when we involved in ensuring or measuring the maturity of an organization's security and governance is risk appetite. Often the organizations don't really know themselves how much risk do I want to accept, and then we have to foster the discussion in regards to, well, we can't say how much risk you would like to take. You need to decide as a business for yourself, let's say, what amount of time is acceptable when you get hit by a threat actor. They successfully compromise your environment, and maybe you get hit by ransomware and your environment is flattened down, dead in the water. How much time, how much risk appetite you have to accept this risk by at the same time enabling new technologies, giving your employees flexibility to after COVID, the amount of remote access significantly increased. So how much flexibility do you want to give to your organization, to your teams, to your customers to dial in, to implement new technologies, to play with new technologies in your production environment? This presents a risk. This increases attack surface, that increases the likelihood that the threat actor may find an entrance. And as he said, finding the right balance in articulating what is acceptable and what's not, and to communicate this so that everybody has the same understanding, because that is another issue that we often see, that the leadership team says, well, we defined our policies, and if you ask the people that need to work with these policies and need to adhere to them, they sometimes even don't know that these policies exist. So that is definitely a difficult thing that the organization need to handle.
You started to say in the beginning, Lars, also that often it starts with new technology, right? And then the sequence goes. So let's go to that angle also here, Mark. So Microsoft, you already mentioned Azure, right? You were mentioning, so what you see the discussion about cloud, and you see the discussion about a lot of people saying, what do I do on-prem, what do I do in cloud? Am I going to work with some workflow platforms? Do I want to make myself able to embrace SaaS and PaaS, to put on? How do I get AI in terms of value journeys? Do I go do my tech stack? I want to go modular, right? Much more easier. So you're in the midst, as Microsoft, in that discussion, right? Is tech the starting point?
Innovation, I think, is the starting point. So innovation is driving the business. Whether the CISO always knows what the developers are doing is a different discussion. It's more an organizational discussion, I think. What I've seen during security assessments is that developers, in their right way, they want to develop new stuff, so they do stuff, right? And as Lars already said, it's not always yet fully governed from a legal perspective, etc. So they try stuff, especially now with the AI emerging stuff, right? So everything is AI, blah, blah, blah. And what I see during security assessments is that companies think, the CISO thinks, well, I have control. I know what's in my environment, while developers have done stuff that is just floating around the Azure environment, right? So instead of the CISO thinking, I have 400 subscriptions that we need to manage, right? And they are secure, and I have my security posture management around them, and it's all fixed and perfect, and also in the multi-clouds. There are still 300 subscriptions, other stuff that is connected, staying Azure tenant, but it's not governed. So things are happening there where there are risks. And that's where I think the risk is. So again, coming back to the question, what is your risk appetite, is how do you make that visible? And there is a communication. So sometimes the operational teams think, I'm responsible for this, so I will report this in my KPIs, saying, hey, I've patched 200 servers, it's all fine. Well, there might be other subscriptions out there, there might be more stuff out there. And so although the CISO gets a report, it's green, 99% patch, awesome. We forgot 200 servers somewhere else, and they're connected to the internet. And
fair point. Is there from your experiences, Rien, maybe a glimpse on that? So if we go back to the discussion also about technical debt, right? And I think that it's fair to say there's also people debt and there is process debt, right? But if you go to the technical debt, so you've been 25 plus years around doing, I guess, some changes, right, in your tech stack, right, so to speak. But is that a different dilemma in terms of resilience? Then you see the discussion now going with all those new emerging technologies and getting, for example, AI even in production, right?
I think so, yeah. I think so. In the past it was more easy. The threats were not that heavy as today, not so sophisticated as today. And then it was easily to isolate your legacy systems, and you could put them in a different network segment, for instance, or firewall in between. More technical things, but that was quite easy. But nowadays, with modern technology, it's much more cloud-based, it's much more subscription-based, so it's much more difficult to control. You give people more tools to do the nice things, hopefully.
Right.
And in the past, you had your, let's say, your legacy AEP, your old SAP. It was there. And that was it. You know, you had a few developers, maybe you could develop something, but that was it. And now it's much more open, more connected. Yep. So it's much more difficult to control, for sure.
What came into my mind when Mark mentioned that his point with the different technologies and what also came from you with the different pillars, new technologies, people and services, etc. From my point of view, what we often, what myself often sees is that there are the vertical pillars, let's say people, new technologies, processes, etc. And then there's an underlying overarching layer of, and the pillars are new, and the horizontal bar are the old standard things that even in the old times have been the same. Let me give you an example. For example, change management databases. If you know what you have, then you can protect it. In the old days, maybe you had your firewall, you had your server, you had your client, you had your walls and firewalls around your, this is my island, that is secure. That was difficult enough to understand, what do I have in my castle? What do I have in my wall, in my towers, etc., in my protection systems? Now, the new technologies like AI, like cloud, etc., you add additional pillars, still having the same horizontal bar of you need to know what, you need to have your risk appetite, you need to define what is acceptable, what's not. You have your legal things, all overarching topics, and they get more and more complex as you get more and more additional subject matter, subject topics and technologies and areas. So it gets more and more complex, but I think often it feels like that the organizations don't follow up with the complexity. So, and that I can imagine puts additional pressure onto CIOs and CISOs in a significantly more complex environment, still feeling a little bit like being in the old days where everybody thinks, it's internal, it's secure, but having so much more things you think about, new technologies, new processes, new people, new regulations, etc. That is a hard job.
Yeah.
It becomes an afterthought, basically. So for a large company, without names, so they are transitioning to the cloud, right? So transitioning from on-prem to the cloud. They have a number of subscriptions. Again, the same story. We manage only these subscriptions. They are part of our SLA internal between the organizations. It's, of course, for bigger companies. And then there are ways that you can provide the guidelines saying to whoever is doing something in the subscription or in Azure or in AWS, Google, it all has the same principle, saying, well, these are the guardrails that you need to align to. This is what the organizational policy is. And if you have more requirements due to the application you're using or whatever, you can add that on. But these are the guardrails. These guardrails are sometimes not even set.
No.
Yeah, I think
So it is a paper-based policy. Yes, we have a policy here, but it's not applied.
But you have to control it. So you have, I think also, we now as a CIO or a CISO, you have modern tools in place that you can control your environments, right? So it's not like in the old days that you know, oh, we have an SAP server or the Oracle server, we have everything on-prem. There are modern tools that can give you insight in what kind of applications run on your cloud, in your network, or outside in your wide area network. You can have tools. So we should apply those tools and use them. And I think that's also sometimes lacking.
It is.
And because then you will know, oh, you have 200 descriptions, oh, we have 400. You know, and those kind of things you can easily detect.
That is again governance, right?
That is a point that we also often see, even if you have the tools, if you have additional tools, additional solutions, additional products, if the communication in these organizations often not as efficient as it should be, and then organization A has one tool, and organization B or C have other tools that have an overlapping capabilities, then we see that organizations struggle to consolidate their tooling and to have one, in best case, one view, one dashboard that shows across in best case, all infrastructure parts and components, and comprehensive view so that it's easier for those that need to make an interpretation and raising an alert, even if I have AI and automation. It's really
what I want to say is that, you know, you have your governance, you can support your governance with tools. And you should use those tools to make sure that you have the right governance in place and you control it. Otherwise, you get lost more easily than in the past.
Yeah. Now it's getting in deep. So let's go back to that discussion, right? So do we really think that things are getting simple?
No,
no.
no.
So, and where does that lie?
I think the technology gets more and more complicated. There are more threats. There are more things we can do. So that's kind of is an evolving stack. While on the other hand, companies have also their legacy environment or even connected to OT environments, and it all needs to communicate to each other, and we want to see all the signals. So from a security perspective, it becomes challenging, and most companies, they don't properly do things that are not supported anymore within the industry, firewalls, servers, whatever, right? We don't decommission them. We keep on having them. And then we as the security company needs to secure them. And we're asking ourselves, okay, how? Just take out the internet cable? What do you want us to do? What is the risk appetite, right? It comes back to the discussion that Lars had.
But if we take that discussion about technology, right? Mm-hmm. And if you take the discussion about, let's say, we are in the midst of changing way of workings, right? So if there is a big digital transformation going on, most likely there's a change of the operating model. You want to have new business models. The organization model is changing, right? So there's a lot of pressure on capabilities and capacities, right? But in the end, is that frameworks we need, that guardrails, is the set of compliance, is the set of change within technology sufficient enough to support all those changes? Because it looks like that all those changes are going faster than we can cope up, right?
It is.
It's IT definitely is one of the. I hope I make not other industries angry, but it feels to me as if IT is a very fast-pacing industry where the changes are very fast. If you look, when computers came out the first time, I don't know, 1980s or something like that, and where we are now with AI, where drones can fly autonomously and all kind of things. It's so fast, and it feels like that the intervals between new significant steps in the industry get shorter and shorter and shorter. So that's definitely a challenging situation to cope for an organization, to cope with all the additional risks that are introduced into your organization or your environment, and to cope with these risks and understanding the impact of these different technologies. And as the technologies get complexer, the risk assessment gets complexer from my point of view, and that makes it hard for the industry.
But if you go back, Rien, after 25 years. We often say life is getting more simple, right?
Yes.
If you look to today's state of the art of technology, if you look to today's state of supporting that business discussion where 25 years ago it was a cost center, right? Now it's a value discussion, right? So where does it go wrong in our mindset then?
I think it depends a bit on yourself and as a CEO, your role. I think, you know, what I try to do always when I started in a new position as CEO, standardize applications, harmonize applications, you know, just bring the landscape back to from a huge complex situation to a less complex situation. And if you have that less complex situation, and sometimes you don't need to upgrade, but just sunset old applications or legacy applications, replace it by other ones that you have in your stack. And that also, because then you reduce complexity, it also enables the business to grow, because you only need to change your applications or adapt your applications only once for supporting the growth, so to say. Instead of you have 10 legacy systems, you have to upgrade or to change all those 10 legacy systems. So it's still about reducing complexity. And I think it's essential as a CEO that you do that. Otherwise, it's very difficult to control your environment, and you cannot support the business in their growth plans, right? And then if you have this less complex situation, you can easily bring in new technology, but only when it makes sense.
Right.
In my view, there's no need to bring new technology unless it's absolutely bring something new that you don't have in your stack.
Right. So is new technology like cloud and like embracing, for an example, AI, is that a solution that helps you to kill the legacy, Mark?
Oh, sorry, I thought the question was to him.
No.
Rephrase?
Is new technology embracing like going into multi-cloud, going to SaaS solutions, going to getting AI in production? Is that a solution to decomplex legacies? Is that the only answer?
I don't think so. I think while you were discussing, I thought about startups, right? So no, but a startup company has less complexity because they start up in the cloud. It's all new, it's brand new. They take the newest tools. Bigger companies that have been around for some time, they have legacy stuff. So that's also another point of view within that discussion.
So if you go to that discussion on technology, do we see a change or do we need a change if you look to the current situation, for example, within compliance? So let's look to NIST or let's look to DORA or let's look at is a change of technology and embracing emerging technologies where we don't yet know what is happening. Is that also a pressure on the change within compliances? Do we need to tweak them even harder? So for example, we don't see the risk yet embracing AI to the max, right? Mm-hmm. We still cannot. We can do some scenarios, but we still don't know yet what's happening there, right? We still don't know what will happen if we go really full flash in getting the legacy out of OT, right, and getting the connection to IT much more, and getting analytics on it, business intelligence on it, AI on it, whatever, right? Do we still need to tweak that or not? Do we still find ourselves in a position that maybe the current guardrails are not set right, or the current set of what we need to do within compliance is still not there?
This for me feels like almost a philosophic discussion, to be honest. And I'm pretty sure if you ask 10 people, you get 10 answers on these things. I think the key point is for an organization to get their ducks in a row in regards to understanding what they, and bringing all, even if you have new technologies, for me, most of the time you can bring back also new technologies to some key, simple key principles like confidentiality, integrity, availability, and maybe some other new things that I can't come up with at the moment. But if you address confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and if you add also the point that I made before in regards to know what you have, then you are already in a pretty good shape. And if you manage to communicate these things aligned with your business requirements, so that your teams, that your employees, that your organization knows and understands and live these principles. In all security handbooks, you see one important topic: educate your people. You can have the most significant new technologies, but your people are a very good detector for something suspicious. Key buzzwords, social engineering, etc. People that, and with these deep fake things where you hear the voice from your CEO or from a famous person from your company saying, this is an emergency, please give me the password from whatever. Your people need to be educated, and they need to be ensured that being concerned is a value and is appreciated, and not I pull the plug because I think it's a ransomware, and when they pull the plug, it may have an impact onto the production line. And we saw situations where it has been too early pulled the plug, and that had an impact on the production. But we also saw situations where it hasn't pulled, and that had an even significantly more impact on the organization. And it would have been better if they have plugged. And your organization, your employees, I think, need to be ensured that security is one of your number one priorities, and that impacts obviously how secure you are and how good you are prepared. And often when I, as a remediation leader, often involved in crisis situation, simple questions can't be answered. I brought up the CMDBs. Where are your internet outbreaks? What patch level your systems have compared to what is in the CMDB, which servers you have, which tenants you have in your environment, who is responsible, who is reachable 24/7 or something. There are very generic technology-independent questions. If those would have been addressed proactively, the incident very likely would go significantly faster away if you would have addressed your basics at the beginning, and not on a weak basis. If the ground is weak, if you put more and more stuff on the ground, it doesn't get more stable. So to address the basics, I think that is a very good start from my point of view.
Yep.
That's a resilience discussion, right? And so many times you hear companies, yes, we are prepared, we have a disaster recovery plan, we have this. And then the question that incident responder says, okay, have you done a tabletop, first of all? Do you know who to communicate to, right? So tabletop is basically just saying, around the table, this is the problem, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do, right? If that communication is not clear, as Lars said, it will not help to reduce the incident much faster.
No.
And the next step is do an actual incident, right? Because that will help the organization to train, to make mistakes, to learn. And that learning aspect is very important because that helps you to improve, to increase your resilience.
Right. So is it just a maturity discussion, what we're aiming at? So it needs more attention, it needs more focus, right? Is it just a maturity discussion, like we have the same discussion within the change within an organization of an operating model, etc.? Is it a discussion where you see, well, I do a lot of stuff, we do pen testing, we do X, we do Y, but when we spend money, but is it just a maturity discussion about crisis management, incident management?
I think it's combining all these little things.
Yeah, it's
So
a multi-dimensional
It's a
thing.
multi-dimensional thing. Yeah. So doing all these little things is good, but make sure that it is connected. And one is not by definition worse or better than the other one.
And that brings us back to the beginning, from my point of view, having a strategy and a vision and doing it aligned with the business, aligned to a strategy so that you know what you do and not just randomly get pushed by the different technologies and trends that may come up, but defining intentionally, we want to do this, we have this business, we have these business cases in order to achieve making an informed decision, in best case provided by trusted partners or advisors to understand this is approach A, this is approach B, this is approach C, pros, cons, pros, cons, pros, cons, we recommend that. And based on these experiences, making an informed and aligned, business-aligned decision and strategy. I think that is the most important thing.
Is that, in your opinion, lacking in all your customer interfaces, in all your advisory services?
Yeah, you can't say generally this is always lagging, but we see
There's room for improvement there?
it's consulting wording, but there are always somewhere room for improvement. You can't do everything right, but some organizations have strength there where they have on other areas weaknesses, so that it's difficult to generalize.
I like the wording you choose about strategy, right? So what you often see today, if I talk with CISOs, for an example, you see that they are very, very happy if they can say, but my index is right, all my, if you look to my dashboard, I have a lot of green lights, right? And then, but how about your strategy? How is that aligned, right, from your growth strategy or your digital transformation strategy or your change in your operating model or embracing of, right?
CISO should be business and businessman, in fact, right? It should business acumen, a lot of business acumen. Because at the end of the day, it's all about revenue, growing revenue, whatever. And the CISO should support that from a starting point. And then, of course, reduce the risk and make sure you have the right things in place. But also a CISO should support business growth.
Right.
From my understanding is, supporting what you said, is that usually I would assume a CISO or a security organization should aim to be a service provider within the organization, and their task, the service providers, security service providers' task within the organization is to satisfy their customers. Their customers are their employees in the organization, and they need to understand what are their needs, what are their requirements, what are their boundaries and their business, and this basically defines the return of invest. And if in best case you manage somehow to address the expectations from your customers means your employees that have a desire to do something in best case in a business aligned way, and that you can provide your services to your organization, and that the organizations values this and says, often we hear the problem is that security, as long as nothing happens, it just costs money. Everybody knows this, I'm pretty sure. But when something happens, then the cry starts and, we pay you so much money, why this happens, etc. And that's definitely is contributing to the stress that are associated to these
Do you
rules.
see many CISOs with this attitude? I haven't seen many of those. Most of them are just saying no, no, no. And so I have quite experience with some CISOs, also from big American companies. And they are about to kill some businesses because they think they have the right to do that from a security perspective. And then that's blocking progress and growth, coming back to the team here, blocking growth from the company. Even, I have an example that we had one customer in the past, we did I think $1 billion turnover. And then they would just try to block it and say, hey, you cannot do any business with them anymore. That really happened. And then what are you going to do? So those old-fashioned, I call it old-fashioned CISOs. You are in the CISO community now. What do you think? Are the CISOs more business-minded, or still guys who blocking things and then get burned out and whatever because everybody hates them at the end of the day?
There is a saying, CISOs that are loved by the organizations are bad CISOs. So really, or maybe not only CISOs,
that illustrates what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, that underlines 100% what you said. But that's also something that we often see in projects is that security always says no, 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 and the project says, what the heck? They always say no. So that's definitely a tension area.
They are not coming on the table, are not invited anymore, so they are completely, set aside because nobody wants to have them involved because they are not contributing.
And then you go back to the beginning of the discussion. They do things outside of the visibility of the CISO, which increases risk to the organization.
And now something is happening, right? This is the kind of discussion we would like to have because there's no good or wrong. There's no right. So there's no red and black and white, or so to speak. So in the whole discussion, what we see happening, and that's what I find interesting in the discussion is that we have regulations, right? We have compliances, right? We have governances, right? there's a huge number of emerging technology popping up, what changes our business models, operating models, etc. So there is a kind of a matrix organization built also in IT and also in security, right? And also in HR, and also we got old classic function models, right? So there is a lot of changes going on. But we know the fact is that from a global perspective, the threats are going to be, well, bigger and bolder, right?
Right.
So the resilience discussion, I think, is a fair discussion. And I think it's a better discussion than to go only to in-depth discussion. Do I comply enough, right? Because I think that's a dashboard discussion, right? In the end.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's
And especially,
to a certain degree, right?
and especially during incidents, if the compliance officer, and we have been in that situation, where the compliance officer says, yes, but if we were compliant, the incident would never have happened. Well, it doesn't work like that, right?
No.
So compliancy does not equal security. However, they are both adding up. It's a combined effort.
Right.
Compliancy will help, definitely.
Yeah.
And will be a requirement. I mean,
And
you can't
it
go
is a
around.
requirement, right? So
Yeah.
You can't go around compliance.
Every company, I think, will suffer from some incidents, right, at some point in time. So resilience, come back to that, is of course essential. How fast are you back in business, right? How fast can you detect where the hack come from?
Right.
Those kind of things. I think every company should prepare for that. Every
Right.
company.
So let's try to wrap it up, because I think it's important to provide some keynotes back to the audience, right? But also some learnings, but also perhaps some intention points, right? So let's take that roundup, Mark. And so, what in your mind should the organizations, from a CAO, CTO, but also from the CISO perspective, what should they do or don't, right, in regards to embracing resilience as a different discussion today than perhaps a discussion about cybersecurity only, right?
from a resilience perspective, I would definitely recommend companies to have a prioritization of what's important to the business. So, as was being said, that the CISO, CIO is basically with one foot in the business and one foot in the IT. Make sure you understand where do we earn our money and is that well protected. That is prioritization. Make sure you have disaster recovery and scenarios for that. Make sure you do tabletops. And the other side, don't forget the rest. Make sure you know everything that is within your infrastructure. Not only what the people report, but ask to the operational people, because they know sometimes better than what the head of security is reporting to the CISO, because that's part of this is my scope. Operational people will know, well, that is our scope, but we have some stuff there also. And I've heard in a meeting of something over there.
Right. Thanks. Rien?
Many things have already been said. So for me, it's important that the CISO is a business guy, has business acumen, is involved in projects, can make sure there are guardrails, of course, where the project should maneuver within. But CISO should be really a guy that helps the business moving forward, support the growth, set policies, of course, and also communicate them, like you said. Many times policies are just somewhere in the closet in a drawer and nobody take care of it. And from an IT security perspective, we should control our environment continuously. We have the tooling for that. Make use of it and then follow up on it as well, so to make sure that everything that you have in your environment is controlled, at least is known and controlled, I think that's very important.
Well, thanks, Rien. Closing remarks here. So, what would you like to advise the audience? So, what is the really do for you, and what is the really don't for you?
Don't obviously is what has been mentioned with blocking. That's very likely not where the future is to find. And do's is, I like what Mark said in regards to know your crown jewels, know your key business areas, that understand where you can't protect everything in the same way with the same amount of effort. Pareto principle, where you have the 80-20 rule, etc. So make sure that the stuff that is most important is most protected with the appropriate thing. Having we talked about base principles like confidentiality, integrity, availability. Make sure that you apply these things even to new technologies, new approaches, etc. And we also brought up the point in regards to having a strategy, being aligned between business, what they think where the market goes to, what they want to contribute, or where they want to participate from the market, and evaluate which technologies and guardrails are best fitted to get these things addressed. Again, it's a difficult exercise with a lot of challenges. But that makes it also sexy and interesting. So from that point of view, right, it's not only bad, there's also a lot of stuff that can make a lot of fun. So I think that's right, a cool thing at the end.
Right? Yeah, I like it, I like it. So just pop up the last slide for me, right? Because I want to end with that message. So we see a lot of discussions going green and going red, right? And I think what I sense here in this discussion today is that it's not that black and white, it's not that green and red discussion, right? So I think that the answer for today, what I would like to give the audience back is that, and thanks for the contribution, gentlemen, is it's not a green and red discussion, right? It's a discussion where you really need to be very sensitive about what is a risk appetite in terms of growth, but what does it mean in terms of resilience, in terms of compliance. So in the end, it's again a discussion is you have to do it together, you have to make it work, right?
Sure, always.
So we gotta kill this one, right? There's no separate growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? Because in the end, we need to go forward, and forward in that perspective of change means that we need to embrace also resilience, also cybersecurity, and we need to be aware of the fact that the world is changing. So what does it mean for now? Again, thanks for your contribution. I like the discussion because it brings probably some extra flavors to the audience from out of the different elements. Do I need to address something else? Yes, of course, when we're going to talk about these kind of topics again, it's in the Digital Growth Summit, right? And of course, there we have got a great lineup, also within a panel discussion between the CEOs, CDOs, and the CISOs, because we need to keep focusing in that it's not a black and white or it's not a green and red discussion. So that's on October the 8th. Do I need to say anything more? No. Thank you. Later.